The late controversy between McLaren, Norris and Piastri over who would win the Hungarian Grand Prix produced one of the most unique situations that we have seen in a while. The most important point that I want to try and get across is that this whole dispute came about because McLaren were the ones who put their drivers into that situation in the first place by pitting Lando first and allowing him to jump Oscar. The team's reasoning was that they wanted to cover Lewis Hamilton, who had just put on a set of hard tyres and potentially could have undercut Lando. At the point that Lando was told to box, the gap between him and Oscar was over 2 seconds, and the gap between him and Max in third place was over 7 seconds. Even once he came out of the pits, however, the gap between him and Lewis was over 5 seconds, which means that Lewis wasn't even that close to actually undercutting Lando anyway. That is why, to me, pitting Lando first was just pointless. And even if by chance Lando had been jumped by Lewis if they waited to pit him after Piastri, or if he had a slow pit stop, the McLaren on mediums would have been so much faster than the Mercedes on used hards anyway that he could have just passed him on track. I know all of the headlines coming away from this weekend will be about Lando, about the team orders and the should he or shouldn't he have let Oscar through. But to me, the root of the problem, which has been a pattern for McLaren in recent races, was yet another sloppy strategical decision that put their drivers under more pressure than they needed to be. The mistakes actually didn't even stop there, because once Oscar was jumped and came out 2 seconds behind Lando, the team should have got on the team radio straight away and told Lando to swap places when the gap was still small between the two of them. From there, they could have just used the rest of the race to work together and pull away from the Hamilton and Verstappen battle behind. Over the radio to Lando, yet again there was a lack of assertiveness, they were indecisive, and when Lando was told, "We want to re-establish the order at your convenience," it almost sounded like they were scared to straight up tell to Lando to get out of the way and let Oscar back past. The problem with that message is that it's not a clear, direct order, and it opens up a grey area where it looks like the driver can choose what they want to do. And now, after the race, Lando did say multiple times that he always intended to give the place back, but I'm not fully buying it. We all heard the same radio messages, and even the radio silence when the team asked him repeatedly to slow down. He also did then kind of backtrack a little bit by saying that he did also think about not giving the place back. You've got to think of yourself. That's priority number one, is to think of yourself. I am also a team player, so my mind was going pretty crazy at the time. Ironically, had the team radioed Lando to let Oscar through straight away after they both pitted, given that Lando did have a tenth or two over Oscar in terms of race pace, he would have had over 20 laps to overtake Oscar on track and legitimately win the race himself anyway. What came next was something I have never heard before in my time of watching Formula 1. We have seen team orders disputes in the past and drivers going backwards and forwards over the radio with their teams all the time, but McLaren was so nervous that they basically started to resort to emotional blackmail with Lando. We heard messages like, "Just remember every single Sunday morning meeting we have, you've proved your point and it really doesn't matter, I know you'll do the right thing, I'm trying to protect you mate, I promise I'm trying to protect you." And then Will Joseph finally said what they really wanted to tell him, which was that the way to win a championship is with a team. You are going to need the team. You are going to need Oscar. Especially once Lando was giving them the silent treatment, you could blatantly hear that the team were worried about Lando not giving the place back, and there was definitely some trust that was broken in that moment. I mean, to me, those radio messages were not only bizarre but almost embarrassing to listen to at one point, with the team basically begging Lando to give the place back. Eventually though, with 3 laps to go, Lando did move over, but not before making a point by extending his lead over Oscar to almost 6 seconds. And now, even though I mentioned earlier that I think Lando had a tenth or two of race pace over Oscar, because this race was dictated so much by tyre management and specifically tyre temperatures, we don't know how much the drivers were actually pushing and how much pace they were conserving. In the final stint, for example, if Oscar has been told by the team that he's definitely going to be given the place back, then in his mind, why should he feel the need to push 100% and risk damaging the tyres in the final stint? On Twitter, I asked people if they were in Lando's position, would they have given the place back? And the vote was basically 50-50, slightly in favour of not giving the win back to Oscar. And then the most telling interaction, which I thought was hilarious and encapsulated the no-win situation that Lando was in, was this reply to one of my tweets where one person says that everyone wanted to see Lando win because it means he closes the gap in the championship, which is true because we do want to see a closer fight, and then another person replying with, no, we want to see Oscar win, which is also true because he definitely deserved to win that race. And now after the race, I actually felt really sorry for Oscar more than anyone else, because despite winning his first Grand Prix, the team in Lando definitely took the spotlight away from him, and it made it feel less special than it should have been. I have repeatedly said on my channel that I think this season, Oscar has been the unluckiest driver on the grid, because whether it's the safety car timings, marginal track limits violations, or strategical howlers by the team, I don't think that his points tally relative to Lando truly reflects the level that he's been driving at. More than anything else, I have loved his calm, stone-cold mentality, and it feels like he just doesn't get rattled by anyone. There's no doubt that even since the start of this season, he has made huge strides in his race execution, and now we know that not only is he capable of taking race wins away from someone who's outqualified him, but he's also granite under pressure when leading the race, which is only going to get better and make him stronger the more opportunities he has to win races. Even though it almost got taken away from him again by the team in Lando, this race felt like finally everything came together. He proved that he is more than capable of standing up to the pressure, managing his tyres and pace perfectly around a tricky track, and despite making a few mistakes during the race, he nailed the start, which is where ultimately the race was won. It proves to me that with a bit more qualifying speed, which would allow him to outqualify Lando more regularly, and also a bit more luck, he is going to be a championship contender in the coming years. I think this race needs to be a bit of a wake-up call for Oscar, because yes, Lando gave him back the position this time, but I think the fact that Oscar has never had a Grand Prix win made a big difference. So far he has been Lando's number 2, and the way that the team was talking about Oscar paying back Lando in the future, I think Oscar needs to make sure that he doesn't put himself in a position where the team can use him to help Lando, and he needs to show them that he is not there to help Lando, he is there to take wins away from Lando and be the one to win the championship. Lando's perspective, however, I think is the most interesting and definitely the most conflicting. As the video title suggests, if I was him, I would have done the much more unpopular, much more controversial, and definitely morally wrong thing to do and held on to the win. Me personally, watching the race, I wanted Oscar Piastri to win because in general I think Oscar more than deserves to be a race winner, especially after that race. But if I was Lando, I would have put my own interests ahead of the team's and hoped that they'd be able to accept my decision even if they didn't agree with it. At the end of the day, Formula 1 is a bit of a hypocrisy, because although the team will always emphasize how you can be winners together if you win the Constructors' title, the truth is, only one driver can win the Drivers' Championship, which is what history actually remembers, and that means that one of the drivers within a team will always be the loser. I mean, just ask Lewis Hamilton how much the 2021 Constructors' title means to him. If I was Lando, I would have rationalized it as, if our collective goal is to win the Constructors and Drivers' titles, and we truly believe that we will win both, then with me in front of Oscar, we still score the exact same number of points for the team, but we actually make even more progress in the Drivers' Championship, which only I can actually win. Oscar is going to be a race winner in the future, but today, you have put me in a position where I can win this race, and even if I don't deserve it, I need to capitalize on it, especially with Max finishing down in 5th, which means that we can gain 15 points in the Drivers' Championship. This situation about drivers putting their own ambitions ahead of the team's is nothing new, and a lot of comparisons were drawn to the Multi-21 controversy between Vettel and Webber, when Seb ignored the team orders to stay behind Mark and decided to overtake him for the win. What I find quite interesting is that Seb was definitely the villain after that incident, in the same way that Lando would have been had he ignored the team orders. But in the end, Seb and other great drivers like Schumacher and Hamilton don't care what people think of them. That utter selfish confidence that Seb had on that day in his own ability and his own goal of being champion, is also the same mentality that made him win 9 races in a row that season to utterly dominate the championship. I think the problem for Lando is that he's trying so hard to be this perfect driver and nice person that always does things by the book, always trusts the team, and never steps out of line. Another irony is that he was asked about this exact thing coming into Hungary, saying, "I am a nice guy and I try to be respectful in every way that I can." But that has absolutely zero relevance for what happens on track. If I want, I can be a lot more of a and act like an idiot and have that persona and make people think that I am ruthless, but I don't need to and I don't want to. And now Andrea Stella made a point to say that you have to be a team to win in Formula 1, and on one hand he's totally right. I don't want people to think that I'm advocating for Lando to be this totally selfish at all times person who on track never helps his team, only ever thinks about himself, and always puts himself ahead of the team. My argument is that in Hungary, there was a justifiable reason for Lando to put himself above Oscar, because he is the only one that can realistically win the championship. My other argument to Andrea Stella would be that if Mr. Nice Guy Lando Norris has been so perfect and is doing everything right so that the team can operate at their best, then why do they keep letting Mr. Nice Guy down if he's doing everything right? McLaren to me this season have lost just as many points for Lando as Lando has for himself with the decisions that they thought would be best for their driver. And now again, Lando did the right thing by giving Oscar back his first ever Grand Prix win, because had he gone against the team, then it opens the door for trust issues down the road between him, the team, and Oscar that could cost him more points than he's gained in this situation. But I have always felt that although we have seen moments where the second driver has helped the number 1 driver in the championship, with Perez blocking Hamilton in Abu Dhabi 2021 being the best example, I think sometimes this is overvalued because the truly great drivers do everything in their power to dominate their teammates and never put themselves in a position where they need their teammates' help. If you've listened to what the team has said, although they definitely want to win both, in terms of achievability there is definitely a bigger emphasis on the constructors than the driver's title. And now I am not saying that they've given up on the driver's title, but they don't give me the impression of a team who has the confidence that they can still win both. McLaren have had a car that's been capable of fighting for race wins in each of the last 8 races. The gap between Max and Lando in the championship is 76 points. There is still 11 races left, and that adds up to a maximum of 286 points for the winner if they are also able to take the fastest lap. Or when you actually consider how good McLaren's car is, and theoretically they could have the best car in every single one of the remaining races, I think the reason why people tend to laugh when I mention that they can still win the driver's title is because even if the team did everything right, I don't think that people see Lando Norris as a driver who's good enough to close that gap. If Hamilton, Verstappen, Alonso or Leclerc were in that McLaren, firstly, I don't think those drivers would have lost the races that Lando and McLaren have lost, and so hence I don't think the deficit would have been quite as big as Lando has to Max at the moment. And to me, if you give those drivers the best car for the next 11 races and a 76-point gap to close, I think a lot more people would believe that those drivers could get it over the line, because they have proven that under pressure, with their backs up against the wall, they can dominate stretches of a season to win the championship in a way that I don't think Lando Norris has shown the ability to do. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.